Hello, friends. I'm back. I say we're back. I don't know if you're back. I'm back. I've recovered from my once every 6 to 12 months forgetting that I don't really enjoy making 2006 era Let's Play content anymore. And I thought, you know what? Let's jump on a 2016 bandwagon instead and make a tier list. Just ranking every. Let's just rank every card and relic in Slay the Spire, class by class, shall we? If you're not familiar with Slay the Spire, yes you are. You've played roguelike deck builders before. You should play it, by the way. Fucking great game. Sequel coming out later this year. Cannot wait. I completely lost my train of thought, by the way. Haven't eaten today. So I may have to record this in 2 parts. But yeah, great game. I am a long-time player of Slay the Spire. I'm not the best player in the world, by any means, but I do play on Ascension 20, the highest difficulty, and I thought, you know what, let's go through and we'll just rank every card in Slay the Spire according to how much I like it. Not necessarily. I'm going to be taking a few things into account. I'm going to be taking into account how good I think it is, obviously, how much I enjoy using it, how happy I am to see it, usually Act 1 or Act 2, before the deck has too much identity to it, and yeah, we've got our 5 tiers here. We've got S tier, Snap Pick. You pick it basically every time you see it. Usually. There are very few cards that are truly like that in Slay the Spire, but they do exist. There is Excellent card, one where you're likely to take it probably more than 50% of the time in a card reward. You've got a Break choice here, which is, you know, nothing to be too sad about. These cards are mediocre. We don't necessarily, we're not super happy to see them, but you know, we will probably pick them over a skip in Act 1. And then we've got Derable cards that you almost never want, but there is, again, very, very few cards in Slay the Spire that you will just about never take. Anger, not one of them. Anger says deal 6 damage for 0, and add a copy of this card to your discard pile. So this card is actually really strong damage. It synergizes really well with things like Corruption to get rid of your deck, so that you can draw anger. Obviously that means you want lots of card draw. You don't need very much energy if your deck is using anger to generate a significant proportion of its damage, and you can spend a lot of that energy on card draw and a block. I really like anger, particularly in Act 1. I'm generally happy to see it, and perhaps controversially, I'm actually going to call it an excellent card. I think it is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. It's also a great way to scale with strength. Armaments, 1 energy, gain 5 block, upgrade a card in your hand for the rest of combat. This is a tricky one, because it really depends on what other cards you've got in your hand. For that reason, it excels when you have lots of card draw. The upgrade causes it to upgrade every card in your hand for the rest of combat, which is better, but it's one of those awkward cards that gets worse the longer it's in your deck, right? Because yeah, those upgrades go away after combat, but the proportion of your deck that's upgraded is likely to increase throughout the run. If it doesn't, you're probably doing something wrong, because you should probably be upgrading cards more than you take new cards after about Act 1, I would say. I think this is a bit of a noob trap, Armaments. I think it's fine. I'm going to put it in mediocre. Speaking of noob traps, we've got Barricade. Barricade, big 3-cost power. Ironclad loves big, spicy power cards that take an entire turn to play and give you no immediate effect. Which I think is a bit of a dick move on the part of the developers to put that shit in the first class that a new player is going to be exposed to. Because at the start of the game, I believe only Ironclad's unlocked. But either way, it's going to be the first class. Almost everyone plays. And Barricade is a good card, but it is very rarely one you want to pick, even remotely early. It's a tough one to rank because it fits really, really well in a very specific type of deck, but that is going to go for most low-tier cards. I'm going to put it in Derable, and I love Barricade. And you know what, I did say that was a criterion, so maybe I'll move it up to mediocre. I like Barricade, it's so fun, but it fits only in decks where you generate a lot of block, but you don't do so consistently. So if you generate consistent block, you'd much rather spend that 3 energy on something else, right? Because you're not going to be taking much damage anyway, unless, of course, you spend your entire turn playing a 3-cost power that does nothing on the turn you play it. However, if you don't generate enough block, Barricade's not going to help you with that. Not to the tune of 3 energy, anyway. Yeah, I think it's generally poor. I would take it pretty rarely after the Act 1 boss, which is usually the first time you see it. Bash, I don't like ranking this card. It is like Strike and Defend, which I believe are also here. They are indeed. It's a starter card, and so it's meant to be a bit weaker than cards that you find along the way. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in Derable, because it is. I wouldn't take Bash if you could see it. Most of the time, I'd be very, very reluctant to take Bash if it were just available in a card reward. It does very little damage for 2 energy. Apply 2 vulnerable is fine, but it just seems underwhelming. Battle Trance. Again, I think a bit of a... This card is better than a lot of new players would give it credit for. 0 energy, draw 3 cards, exceptional. However, it does come with the downside that you can't draw additional cards this turn. You don't usually need to. If you're spending 0 energy drawing 3 cards, that's really, really strong in its own right. Yes, sometimes it will turn off a Shrug It Off or a Pummel Strike, sorry. Sometimes it will get in the way of Dark Embrace. You don't care that much. It's an excellent card. It's not a snap pick, but I think it's quite close. Berserk, a 0 cost power. Ironclad powers fall into 2 categories. You have the big, solid, game-changing powers like Barricade and Corruption that are expensive and do lots and lots of shit. And then you have these low-cost powers that are generally just not worth taking. And Berserk definitely falls into that category. Yes, it gives you an energy every turn for the rest of combat, and say on average you play at turn 3, because that's on average when you first play most cards, I would say, at least by the end of the game. That vulnerable is going to hurt. That vulnerable is really going to hurt, and you do still have to go the first couple of turns without that extra energy. It's not as reliable as an energy relic, and you usually don't want to play it when you draw it, because you're getting the shit kicked out of you if you're making yourself vulnerable. It does work with Artifact if you have something like a Clockwork Souvenir, something like that, a Panacea. Go nuts. Take Berserk. Berserk is fine in those circumstances, but I think only in those circumstances. Blood for Blood. 4 energy. Already spicy, but it costs 1 less energy every time you lose health this combat, and in return for that, you get 18 damage. Upgrades to 22 damage and 1 less energy, I think, which is important. Maybe I should be talking about the upgrades. I should probably be talking about the upgrades. I'm going to quickly go through these. Anger upgrades to 8 damage, which is actually quite good because you get a lot of them. Battle Trance upgrades to 4 cards. Armaments, as we said, upgrades to upgrade everything else in your hand. Barricade upgrades to cost 1 less, so it costs 2, which is really good. Bash upgrades to deal 10 damage and apply 3 vulnerable, which is okay. And Berserk upgrades to only give you 1 vulnerable, which makes it much more playable, because if you're not getting attacked that turn, you can actually play it for no cost. Anyway, Blood for Blood is mediocre at best. It does fit into a specific package of cards which deal damage to you, and perhaps benefit from dealing damage to you. Rupture would be the linchpin of that. We'll definitely talk about Rupture later on. Blood for Blood is not a particularly strong addition to it, because if Rupture is the linchpin and Rupture gives you strength, Blood for Blood doesn't scale very well with strength as a big single target attack. Outside of a deck that's already doing a lot of damage to you, you don't need it. You don't want it. It's bad. Bloodletting. Tricky one. Tricky one. This one's 0 energy. Lose 3 health, but gain 2 energy. This is important because Bloodletting is also -1 draw, right? As all cards that don't draw cards, you have to draw Bloodletting in order to play it. So once you play it, you have 2 extra energy, but you have 1 less card to play things that actually do anything. I still think it's good, and it is one that, again, fits into that synergy package, which doesn't usually quite come together of self-damage and potentially healing with something like Reaper. I'm going to put it in Brait Choice. I think it is a Brait Choice, but you have to be careful with it, and it only really works in decks with lots of card draw. Bloodletting actually synergizes better with card draw than it does with self-damage, I would say. That generally works out more often to be good in decks which have a couple of copies of Shrug It Off or like a Corruption Dark Embrace thing going on. Bludgeon, 3 cost, deal 32 damage. Card rarity is a big psychological factor in particularly how often newer players take particular cards. You'll note that I've rated 2 rare cards so far, Barricade and Berserk, and I've called them both pretty bad. Bludgeon is also, I would say, pretty bad. I would take it floor 1, because it does make Act 1 very easy, but it's very difficult to scale. The only way you can scale Bludgeon, really, is with Vulnerable. If you have ways to inflict Vulnerable, Bludgeon gets a lot better. Deals, I think, 48 damage. It upgrades to deal 42 damage, which 42 times 1.5 is 63. So if you have an upgraded Bludgeon with Vulnerable, it deals 63 damage. That's a lot, but for 3 energy, even that isn't great later on in the game. It's just too expensive. So I'm going to put it in Kidioka. Good in Act 1, really, really falls off after that. After it starts, after it stops one-shotting everything. Body Slam. 1 energy. Deal damage equal to your block. This upgrades to cost 0, which is very, very strong. And I would only really take this upgraded, or if I had a way to generate tons of block. Something like Barricade. If I'm building a deck which uses Barricade, then Body Slam just becomes a 1-card damage solution for the deck, which is otherwise going to be very defensive. Of course, you also need ways to draw that Body Slam. If you have something like Barricade, Runic Pyramid, Body Slam can just win you the game. I'm going to put it in Kidioka. I think it can be a break choice, but only in a very specific deck. I think in general, it's not a card I'm happy to draw early. Brutality, 0 cost. At the start of your turn, lose 1 HP and draw 1 card. This is one I've come around on a bit recently. I never used to like it, but let's compare it to... you can probably hear a cat in the background, love her. Let's compare it to the Defect card, which is also a rare power, Machine Learning, which costs 1 and it just draws you a card every turn. So this card, Brutality, costs 1 less, but it also deals 1 damage to you every single turn. I don't think Machine Learning is amazing, but I do think Brutality is quite good. It does solve card draw for you to an extent. Losing 1 HP every turn can be an upside if you have something like Self-Forming Clay, something like Rupture. I think Brutality is very often a good pick, so I'm going to call it a break choice. Burning Pact, 1 cost, exhaust 1 card, draw 2 cards. Oh, Brutality upgrades to innate, by the way, I think. Burning Pact, exhaust 1 card, draw 2 cards, upgrades to exhaust 1 card, draw 3 cards. And again, the upgrade is very strong. +1 draw is extremely powerful. However, it costs 1 energy. Exhausting cards is usually good. We haven't actually seen anything that exhausts anything yet. Exhaustion is a mechanic that's like 90% specific to Ironclad. There are other class cards which can exhaust, but in general it's an Ironclad thing. It just removes a card from your deck for the rest of the fight, and it's usually very strong. This is something that, again, I think new players kind of fall into the trap of thinking, well, I don't want to get rid of my cards. They're my cards. I need them. Fair enough, but you don't need all of them. Maybe you get rid of the ones that you don't need, and that means that you draw the ones you do need more frequently. I think Burning Pact is good, but it's just costs a little bit too much. You can compare this to Acrobatics on Silent, which is 1 energy, draw 3 and discard 1 card. I would say exhausting a card of your choice, almost always better than discarding a card of your choice. I'm going to put it in Kidioka, but I know that a lot of people are ride or die for this card, and it could, some people will put it in A tier. I don't think anyone's putting it in S tier, but maybe we'll see. I say we'll see. I don't know, but you might. I'm not gonna. For me, I don't get very much use out of Burning Pact more often than not. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cough. I had a cold like 4 weeks ago, and I've still got a little tickle. Next up is Carnage. 2 cost. Deal 20 damage. Ethereal. Ethereal is both an upside and a downside. Ethereal just means that it's a pretty rare keyword. It's on a few different cards. But Ethereal just means it exhausts if you don't play it. If it's still in your hand at the end of the turn, it exhausts rather than discarding. I think Carnage is an excellent card, particularly in Act 1. It's got most of the upside of Bludgeon, dealing a ton of damage for a reasonable cost. Does a little bit less damage, costs a little bit less. But if you don't want to play it, you don't have to keep drawing it. Usually, Ethereal looks like a downside, but usually it's actually an upside. Because if you don't play it the first time you draw it, you're probably not going to want to play it in the future, or at least it's less likely that you're in a fight where it's actually good for you. It also leaves you 1 energy left to do something like block, or mostly just block, compared to Bludgeon, which takes your entire turn in Act 1. Carnage is one of the cards I'm happiest to see right out of the gate on floor 0, floor 1. Clash. This is the noob trap of noob traps. If you like Clash, I'm sorry to say it, you've been had, but that's okay. We all have. When we first started playing, we thought Clash was a good card. And to be honest, on low Ascensions, it's not terrible. Clash is 0 energy, can only be played if every card in your hand is an attack, but it deals 14 damage for 0. And so you might be thinking, okay, I picked this early because it costs 0, right? And it deals 14 damage, that's great. And the condition's pretty easy to fulfill. All I have to do is play a couple of defends, which I probably want to do anyway, and then throw a clash at the enemy. Couple of things. Firstly, you don't always want to be playing those defends. If you want to play, like, you can't play like 2 strikes and a clash if you have 2 defends in your hand. So that means clash doesn't really do 14 damage, does it? It does 8 damage because it stops you playing another strike. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly and less nitpickily, you're not always in control of what's in your hand, right? Sometimes you're going to have like Flame Barrier, defend, clash. Sometimes you're going to have strike, clash, dazed. Statuses count towards this criterion, and so do curses. And once you get into higher Ascension, after level Ascension 10, I believe, you are going to have a curse in your deck every single time. Every fight, every combat, every run, you will have a curse. And that curse goes away after the first time you draw it. But if you draw Clash on the same turn, you can't play Clash ever. And that means Clash itself is a dead card, maybe like 20-30% of the time. It's a terrible card, I'm sorry to say. Next up is Cleave, 1 energy. Deal 8 damage to all enemies. This is again one that I'm pretty happy to see early on. I think Cleave is quite strong. There are a couple of fights in the hard pool of Act 1 that really punish you for not having AoE. Couple of things. Because this is something that not everyone knows. Fights in Slay the Spire are divided into easy fights for that particular floor, or that particular act, and hard fights for that particular act. The first 3 fights in Act 1, or the first 2 fights in Act 2 and 3, I'll move my mic a little closer, sorry, come from a slightly easier set of enemies than subsequent fights. And the so-called hard pool of Act 1 has a couple of fights that you really, really want to prepare for, because they will kick you in the tits if you don't have lots of AoE, if you don't have energy generation, if you don't have something like Gremlin Horn, which you're very unlikely to find by the end of Act 1. Cleave is kind of a solve for that. I'm going to put it in Great Choice, but I think it's very nearly an excellent card, and I'm almost as happy to see Cleave as I am to see any of these cards early on. Clothesline. 2 energy, deal 12 damage, apply to weak. Immediate parallel with Bash, by the way. They're both 2-cost attacks that deal damage and apply 2 turns of a status effect. For Clothesline it's weak, for Bash it's vulnerable. But Clothesline does 4 more damage. I can count, does 4 more damage. And to be honest, weak and vulnerable are both very useful. I don't think that applying 2 vulnerable is necessarily better than applying 2 weak, especially when Bash costs 2 energy and does not benefit from its own vulnerable. That leaves you only 1 turn and a little bit of the turn you play it to actually benefit from the vulnerable, whereas weak is just 2 turns guaranteed. It's going to be active as long as the enemy's attacking you. I still don't think Clothesline is very good. Clothesline is Kideoka to me for sure. I do find myself kind of rolling my eyes whenever I find Clothesline as a floor 1 pick, and I'm like, well, it's the best thing here, but I don't have to like it. I think it's fine, but it's just very slow, and you would often rather do a 1-cost attack that does probably pretty close to 12 damage. There are a few coming up that we'll talk about, obviously, and then defending, which may well be better than, probably is better than applying weak. Next up is Combust. Combust, 1 energy. At the end of your turn, lose 1 HP and deal 5 damage to all enemies. So I've been forgetting to talk about upgrades. Cleave upgrades to deal 11 to everything, Clothesline upgrades to, I think, 14 damage and 3 weak. Could be mistaken. Either way, neither of them amazing. Combust upgrades to deal 7 damage to all enemies instead of 5. It's actually pretty good early. And picking a Combust early solves a lot of the same problems as Cleave. It really kicks the ass of the Sentries fight, which can be a little bit of a tough one for Ironclad. Ironclad tends to hemorrhage in elite fights in Act 1, more so than other classes, with the possible exception of Defect. And yeah, you often save a lot more health, putting it in Great Choice, by the way. You often save a lot more health by just ending the fight a turn or even 2 turns quicker, even if that costs you 3 or 4 health immediately. Pretty good in the long run. You will often take less damage. And having a Combust is a pretty good reason, I would say, to start looking for things like Blood for Blood. If you have a Combust, Blood for Blood probably goes up into Excellent Choice or Great Choice, as well as cards like Rupture. Corruption. Corruption is one of the Ironclad cards of all time. Corruption, 3 cost, upgrades to 2 cost. Skills cost 0. Whenever you play a skill, exhaust it. Corruption is one of the strongest single cards in the game, and also one of the most dangerous. You do run the risk of running out of skills. You don't pick Corruption floor 1. You probably don't pick Corruption Act 1 unless you see it after the boss, in which case it might be viable. Corruption is incredibly strong, and as I say, exhausting cards is usually good. But if you don't have a choice whether to exhaust them, that's when it becomes a little bit, do I want to use this Flame Barrier now, or do I want to save it? Do I want to use this this Impervious now, or do I want to save it? If you have enough skills, Corruption is extremely strong. If you have Exhaust synergy, like Dark Embrace, Feel No Pain, Corruption is extremely strong. Dead Branch. I'm putting it in Excellent card. I'd love to put it in Snap Pick, but it is just a little bit too situational. But if you think this card is bad, give it a chance. Especially if you also happen to have another card that you probably think is bad, like Feel No Pain or Dark Embrace. Exhaust synergies are incredibly strong on Ironclad, and Corruption is the absolute linchpin of that pack. Here is Dark Embrace. Whenever a card is exhausted, draw 1 card. It's a 2-cost power, upgrades to 1. And obviously, the glaring thing is that it doesn't do anything immediately, right? You pick it floor 1, and it's a curse. You can play it for 2 energy, so you don't draw it again, and that's that. On a higher Ascension, you have Ascender's Bane, which exhausts, and Dark Embrace kind of gets rid of some of the downside of that, but of course you have to draw and play the Dark Embrace, so it's still a net loss. However, when it's good, it's so good that I'm still putting it in Excellent Choice. I'd love to put it in Snap Pick. There's going to be very, very few cards that go into Snap Pick, and even then most of them aren't actually Snap Picks. But Dark Embrace, very, very strong. Defend, for the same reasons as Bash. I mean, I would never take this card if it were offered in a card reward, which it can't be. Bad card, obviously, move on. Demon Form. 3-cost power. At the start of your turn, gain 2 strength. Upgrades to gain 3 strength every turn. This is one of the slowest single damage plans in the game. It's up there with Wheel Kick as being the slowest scaling damage in the game. It can be good, but it costs an entire turn and it doesn't do anything the turn you play it, which is the downside of a lot of Ironclad powers, as we talked about with Barricade. If you have demon form, you want to upgrade it. In its unupgraded form, it's terrible. In its upgraded form, I'm gonna call it mediocre. I'm sorry, I know it's a... Okay. I know it's a card that a lot of people really like. I enjoy it. I enjoy playing with it, and that's the only reason that it's not indelible. I think more often than not, it's kind of a trap. It's just so slow because, as I was saying, unless you have it bottled, so you'd always draw at turn 1, you're going to draw on average maybe a turn 3. So then you have to actually play it, and by turn 3, most enemies are in full swing of kicking the shit out of you. So you need to actually play it, and you probably take some damage to do so. And then, you have 2 strength next turn? With 4 strength the turn after that, upgraded to 3 or 6? It's just slow. It's just slow. Disarm. Enemy loses 2 strength, exhaust, for 1 energy. Upgrades to enemy loses 3 strength, and exhaust. This is an excellent card, under some circumstances. If you are planning on fighting the corrupt heart of the Spire, the sort of pseudo-secret final boss that is only accessible if you pick up 3 keys on a run, a red key from red key from sacrificing a rest site, a blue key from sacrificing a relic at a chest to pick up the key instead, and a green key from fighting the superpowered, like super elite or burning elite, whatever you want to call it. If you're planning on fighting the heart, which you don't have to, by the way, you can move on to the next ascension level without beating the heart, disarm is exceptional. Because one of the big scary things the heart does is 1 turn in 3, it hits you for 15 hits of relatively low damage that scales up as the fight goes on. So 1 play of a disarm essentially removes 30 damage from each of those hits. And it's an excellent tech card for the heart. In general, it's somewhere between mediocre and Break Choice, but the fact that it's so good specifically against the heart makes me want to put it in Break Choice. Double tap, 1 energy. This turn, your next attack is played twice. Has in my opinion, one of the worst upgrades in the game. It's one of the rare cards that the upgrade actually makes it double in effectiveness. It turns into this turn, your next 2 attacks are played twice. How many times do you play double tap and then play 2 separate attacks that you care about? It's actually pretty rare. Actually pretty rare. I think double tap is generally poor. And it's going in mediocre. It looks cool, and you can definitely make good use of it with something like double tap Whirlwind is a great way to use double tap. Double tap Immolate, double tap Bludgeon if you have 4 energy. Even that's not great. Generally speaking, Ironclad really benefits from synergies that are not specific to... synergies that do not rely on specific attack cards. There are some that do, like there are some attack cards which are like cornerstones of certain decks, like Reaper, for example. Can be Whirlwind as well. Feed kind of counts, but not really. Fiendfire does nothing when you double tap it. Double tap is very limited in usefulness. Dropkick, 1 energy, deal 5 damage. If the enemy has vulnerable, gain energy and draw 1 card. So it essentially is just a free 5 damage if the enemy has vulnerable, and it's garbage tier if the enemy does not have vulnerable. And guess what? Most of the time, the enemy does not have vulnerable. Cards that inflict vulnerable are actually pretty few and far between, for Ironclad even. And Dropkick just doesn't go off as often as I would need it to put it in anything above terrible. It's only 5 damage, upgrades to, I think, 7, but I pick it so rarely I can't remember. It's not good. Dual Wield. Choose an attack or power card, add a copy of that card into your hand for 1 energy. I think it upgrades to add 2 copies. It's a tough one, right? Because it depends entirely on what else you've got in your deck. Notably, you still have to play that, right? I mean, it just costs so much energy to dual wield something that costs anything and then play both of them. What would you even take with dual wield? Something like Reaper? I mean, you can, if you end your turn with these things, you can shuffle them back into your deck, right? And draw them as you go. You can end up with like an extra copy of Reaper. Great. an extra immolate, fight an extra inflame, spot weakness. I'm really running out of ways to use dual wield. Doesn't go off as often as I would like. Notably, limit break is a skill, not a power, so it doesn't work with dual wield. It's mediocre at best. I think it's almost terrible. Entrench, 2 energy, double your block. If you have Barricade, Entrench becomes ridiculous. Going from 100 block to 200 block is great, assuming that you would have ended the fight below 0 block, right? There's literally no benefit to doubling your block if you weren't going to chew through all of the block you originally had that you doubled, right? There's no point going from 100 block to 200 block if you were never going to use that 100 block in the first place. If you don't have Barricade, there is almost no use case for Entrench. It does upgrade to cost 1 rather than 2, and that's almost mandatory, I would say, for it to be remotely takeable. It's going indelible. Evolve, 1 energy. Whenever you draw a status card, draw 1 card. Upgrades to draw 2. There is a synergy package, I say very, very generously, in Ironclad, which revolves around putting statuses in your deck, and then using fire breathing to do a bunch of damage. And Evolve is important in that deck. It's good in certain fights. It's good in the Heart fight, notably. The Heart does put statuses in your deck. It's good in the Sentries fight. It's good in the Tri-Slavers fight, because you do tend to get a lot of wounds in your deck from that fight. And these fights are some of the trickier ones, for sure. I think Evolve is actually fine. I'm going to put it in Great Choice. I think it's somewhere between these two, Great Choice and Kirioka, but I think it goes off enough that it's generally worth taking. Exhume, 1 energy. Put a card from your exhaust pile into your hand. Exhaust. So many exhaust synergies. Exhume is so good with these. Exhume is great with Corruption. If you have Corruption, you want Exhume. If you have Dark Embrace, you want Exhume. If you have Feel No Pain, you probably want Exhume. If you have Fiend Fire, you want Exhume. It's so good with something like Reaper for just ridiculous amounts of healing. It's good with Limit Break because Limit Break exhausts. It upgrades to not exhaust, but it's not usually worth doing that. Just use Exhume. You probably want to pick up Exhume when you see it. It's almost a snap pick. The only reason I've not put it in snap pick is because sometimes you're just not doing exhaust stuff. Usually you want to do a little bit of exhaust stuff, but Exhume, very, very strong. Feed. 1 energy. Deal 10 damage. If fatal, raise your max HP by 3. Exhaust. This is a side quest card. This is a card that gives you a permanent benefit if you're able to use it in a certain way, and it's very, 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 very strong. If you find it before Act 3, it's a snap pick, and that's where I'm going to put it. Because I would take Feed over any of these cards most of the time, with the possible exception of a Corruption if I had a bunch of skills already, or Dark Embrace if I already had a Corruption. Feed is extremely strong. Works really well with Runic Pyramids, so you can just kind of keep it in your hand forever until you want to use it. Scales well with Strength by virtue of being a relatively cheap attack. It's just very strong. Next up, Feel No Pain. I should clarify, by the way, this upgrades to deal 12 damage and raise your max HP by 4 instead of 3. Not the best upgrade, I think. You don't need it to do that, and you'd rather spend that upgrade on something else. Feel No Pain. 1 energy. Whenever a card is exhausted, gain 3 block. Most of the time on Ironclad, you are doing exhaust things. How many of these cards say exhaust on them, particularly the ones near the top? Quite a few. Am I gonna count them? I'll count them. 1, Carnage kinda. 2, not really. 3, 4 cards out of the top 17. So top 13, sorry. Say exhaust. 2 others have kind of an exhaust synergy. Feel No Pain goes off. There are also a lot of fights in the game which put Dazed into your deck, which is a status that you draw it and then it exhausts. It's pretty good. I almost want to put it in Snap Pick. I don't think I would take it floor 1 most of the time, but I would take it over skipping on floor 1. That's true of most of these cards. It's somewhere between these top 2 tiers, for sure. Yeah, above Corruption, because Corruption is more of a commitment. If you're picking corruption, you are becoming a corruption deck, and you're trying to do specific corruption things, and that's very strong. Feel No Pain can actually just be a good tech card. You can put Feel No Pain in your deck. It will normally get you somewhere between 6 or 9 block every fight without you even trying to. And way, way more if you are doing specifically stuff that exhausts, which you usually will be. It upgrades to gain 4 block instead of 3, not the strongest upgrade in the game, but it doesn't need to be. Fiendfire, 2 energy attack. Exhaust all cards in your hand, deal 7 damage for each exhausted card. Exhaust, this doesn't count itself, so if you have 5 cards in your hand, it will deal 28 damage, not 35. But it's very, very strong. It upgrades to deal 10 damage, and it scales really well with strength and exhaust. Ironclad's 2 main kind of quote-unquote archetypes. Either you're doing strength stacking or you're doing exhaust stuff most of the time. Sometimes both. Fiendfire is exceptional as a tech card in both of those archetypes. And it's the card that ties the two together. We're going to put it in Snap Pick. I almost always take Fiendfire. I think it's very, very, very strong. Particularly upgraded. It doesn't do quite enough damage a lot of the time, unupgraded. But just exhausting cards is extremely strong. If you have any of this Synergy, Corruption, Dark Embrace, Feel No Pain, any of that nonsense going on, wild. It's just absolutely S tier. Fire Breathing. Whenever you draw, it's a 1-cost power. Whenever you draw a status or curse card, deal 6 damage to all enemies. Let's take a second. I'm aware that I talk quite quickly, and my throat's getting a little dry. And Fire Breathing is an interesting card. Fire Breathing is a trap, unfortunately. It's so fun to use Fire Breathing. When I was doing my initial Ascension climb on Ironclad, I think it was the Ascension 14 or 15 win, killing the heart each time, that Fire Breathing carried me through. I think I had 2 copies of Fire Breathing Plus. It upgrades to deal 10 damage to all enemies, by the way. And then I had a bunch of Reckless Charges and Power Throughs, and yet even Wild Strike. I had a couple of Curses and a ton of card draw and some block. And I would draw like 7 or 8 cards every turn, and everything would just explode because I was drawing like 3 or 4 statuses and just destroying everything with Fire Breathing. So much fun. Not good most of the time. I kind of want to put it in Great Choice, even though it's not a great choice, because it is so fun to use. I'm going to put it in Kirioka only because it's so fun. What it does is it encourages you to put a load of bad cards in your deck. It encourages you to take cards like Wild Strike, which is terrible. It encourages you to take Reckless Charge, which is only okay sometimes. Yes, it encourages you to take Power Through, which is secretly a great card, even though a lot of people are scared of it. But it's just not good enough, unfortunately. Flame Barrier, 2 energy, gain 12 block. Whenever you attack this turn, deal 4 damage back. Upgrades to 16 block and 6 return damage, which is quite a generous upgrade. It's good. This music's quite loud, sorry. Turn that down a little bit. Flame Barrier is very strong. Secretly very, very strong. It's 2 energy. A lot of people will shy away from that for a card that quote-unquote just blocks for you, but maybe they stopped reading after the 3rd word, because this card doesn't just block for you. In Act 1, this does a lot of damage. Even in Act 2. You get multi-attacked a lot in Act 2. Now, I'm thinking specifically of the birds, but there's also Snake Plant, which hits you 3 times on most turns. Flame Barrier and Snake Plant is a spooky fight as well. It's very defensively powerful. And Flame Barrier just melts both of those fights. It's an excellent card. Somewhere between these 2 tiers, excellent and great choice, but I'm putting it in excellent card. I pick it more often than not, I think. Flex, 0 cost skill, gain 2 strength. At the end of this turn, lose 2 strength. Upgrades to 4 and 4. This card is... It's not good. It's not good. I don't think I'm surprising anyone when I say that. It just isn't worth drawing. You know, yeah, it costs 0, but it also costs you 1 card draw, right? Because if you weren't drawing flex, you'd be drawing something else. And you'd probably rather draw something else. So why have flex in your deck? It can work. It can be good. I'll turn the music back up. Very variable volume on my D&D playlist. It works really well with Artifact or Orange Pellets. Orange Pellets is a shop relic that allows you to purge debuffs on yourself by playing a skill, attack, and power in the same turn, something which is generally fairly easy to do near the beginning of most combats. The gain 2 strength is a buff that you gain, and lose 2 strength is actually a separate debuff. So if you can purge that debuff on the turn you play flex, then you just get to keep that 2 strength, or 4 strength if it's upgraded. But is that enough, really, to justify all of that fiddling around with playing several different cards that you otherwise wouldn't want to play? No, not usually. It can be, but not usually. And even if it was 0 energy, gain 2 strength, do a bunch of shit, and then keep that strength, that would only be Kidiyoka. It's going in Derrible. Ghostly Armor, 1 energy. Ethereal, gain 10 block. I mentioned in the Carnage review, quote-unquote review, that Ethereal was usually an upside, because if you don't want to play the card the turn you draw it, you probably don't want to play it any other turn. That's true for big damage cards. It's less true for block cards. You are always going to want to have some block, probably. And Ghostly Armor's pretty good. It does mean that you often have to choose between playing Ghostly Armor and playing Ghostly Armor for no benefit, apart from keeping the Ghostly Armor. You have to choose between that and playing an attack card, which could deal damage. Usually that's not too much of a downside, but here I think Ethereal is a downside, and it's going in Break Choice. I think it's still good. It upgrades to, I think, 13 block, I think. Really blanking on that. Yeah, I'm sure it's 13. But it's good. It's a good, efficient block. It's a real block card, and Ironclad doesn't have too many of those. Excuse me, doing a bit of a cough. Next up we have Havoc, 1 energy. Play the top card of your draw pile and exhaust it. You might think this is good, has some exhaust synergy. Doesn't have any exhaust synergy, it just exhausts. Playing the top card of your draw pile is usually not good. If it's an attack, which it often will be, you don't get to pick the target of that attack. There are some times where you just never want to have Havoc if you have something like Impervious, for example, or there's lots of cards you just don't always want to play. Yeah, Berserk would be a great example. If you have Berserk, you definitely don't want to play Havoc. It does count as 2 card plays for the purposes of things like Pocket Watch and Time Eater, Velvet Choker. Even though it upgrades to 0 cost, it is Derrible. Headbutt, deal 9 damage, put a card from your discard pile on top of your draw pile, and that's 1 energy. Upgrades to deal 12 damage. This is deck manipulation, which Ironclad does not have very much of. Headbutt is pretty much the best we've got. Exhaust is a form of deck manipulation, but Headbutt is just directly take a card that you just played or discarded and have it next turn, or if you draw another card this turn, you can have it. Upgrades to deal 12 damage, I think I mentioned that. This is an excellent card. This is one of the best common attacks that Ironclad has access to. It does a fair bit of damage, and it just allows you to not only play a card that you want to play next turn, but it allows you to know one of the cards you're drawing next turn, which really allows you to make good decisions. Next up is Heavy Blade. 2 energy, deal 14 damage. Strength affects this card 3 times. So if you have, say, 3 strength, instead of doing 17 damage, it would do 23 damage. It's pretty good, if you have some strength already. On floor 1, it's fine. On floor 1, it's okay. I would pick most common attacks over Heavy Blade floor 1, I think. But if you have even 1 point of strength, it's 2 energy, 17 damage. And that's just for having like a Vajra or something. If you have an Inflame, it deals 20 damage for 2, which is as much as Carnage, a very strong card. Because it is conditional, I'm only going to put it in Break Choice. But if you have any kind of strength scaling in your deck, it can be a snap pick later on. The only thing that I would caution you on is it can be overkill sometimes, especially for 2 energy. You'd probably rather be scaling with cheap attacks like Anger, Twin Strike, even Pommel Strike, Cleave, rather than these big beefy attacks like Heavy Blade, even though they do have some strength synergy, because sometimes you don't want to do 130 damage to one enemy. Sometimes you want to do 65 damage to 2 different enemies. That seems to be much more common. But Heavy Blade can be very, very strong. Hemokinesis, 1 energy, lose 2 HP, deal 15 damage, upgrades to deal 20 damage. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned, this Heavy Blade upgrades to strength affects this card 5 times, which is quite strong. Hemokinesis, 1 energy, lose 2 HP, deal 15 damage, upgrades to 20. Yes, it does fit in this sort of synergy package that may or may not really be a thing, with Blood for Blood and Rupture and Combust, Brutality. But it's also just a hell of a lot of damage for 1 energy. This is, I would say, first half of Act 1, this is a snap pick. It doesn't scale brilliantly, because if we're scaling with strength, right, then the cards that scale best are these really cheap attacks, like Anger scales really well. And there's also things which hit multiple times, like Cleave, which hits all enemies, or Twin Strike, which will be down here somewhere, which hits multiple times. Sword Boomerang hits multiple times. Hemokinesis hits once, which is fine for 1 energy, but 1 energy isn't the only cost you're paying for Hemokinesis. You're also paying 2 HP. And that can be a real cost. If you're playing it once per combat, every combat, that's quite significant. For that reason, I'm going to put it in Break Choice because it doesn't scale well enough for me to really want to pick it most of the time. It's sort of similar in a way to Carnage. 2 energy deal 20 damage compared to 1 energy and 2 HP to deal 15 damage. I think it's just not quite as strong generally. Carnage also upgrades to deal 28 damage, which is just insane, and it's a very, very high priority upgrade in Act 1, I would say. Hemokinesis, also a high priority upgrade, but only goes up by 5, despite the fact that the cost is not too dissimilar to the cost for playing Carnage. Immolate, 2 energy, deal 21 damage to all enemies, add a burn into your discard pile. Does fit in this kind of fire-breathing deck that I was talking about. That's also not really a thing because of the burn. That burn is a downside 99% of the time, but it's one you don't mind. This is an incredible card. This is a phenomenal card. This card solves the Reptomancer fight pretty much on its own. Reptomancer being, generally for most decks, the toughest elite fight in Act 3 by far. It is insane against Donu and Deke. It's great against the Awakened one. It kills those bird guys pretty dead. It's not great against the Heart. Not everything has to be great against the Heart. It is pretty good against Shield and Spear, the elite fight in Act 4. This is a snap pick for me almost every time. It's so, so good. Next up is Impervious, 2 energy, gain 30 block, exhaust. You give me a Runic Pyramid, this is a snap pick. You give me a Barricade, this is a snap pick. This might be a snap pick on its own. Impervious is so strong. Ironclad does have a real lack of actual good value block. One of the reasons that Feel No Pain is so good is that it's kind of the best of a bad lot. It is good, but in another class with a kind of a comparable effect, let's say, God, I don't know. I've put myself on the spot here. Let's say it's in Defect, and it says whenever you channel a Lightning Orb, gain 3 block for 1 energy. That would be okay, but you might as well be channeling Frost at that point and scaling based on that, right? And actually, that would be pretty good. In Silent, if it said whenever you discard a card, gain 3 block, okay, you discard cards less frequently, but not necessarily that much less frequently. Even if it said whenever you discard a card, gain 5 block, it would be okay, but Silent has so much other block. Defect has quite a bit of other block as well. Ironclad does not have that much block. I appreciate we're not talking about Feel the Pain, we're talking about Impervious, which upgrades to gain 40 block. Honestly, that's not that much better. You usually don't need to block for more than 30, except against the Heart, Shield and Spear, Act 3 bosses sometimes. But it's so good. It's an excellent card. If you have Barricade, it's even excellenter. It's a snap pick, because you can retain that block. If you have Runic Pyramid, it's pretty much a snap pick, despite being an expensive card. So good. I'm trying not to base these on having certain relics, by the way. I'm trying to take them as I would pick them kind of in a vacuum. Because you could say, well, what if you have Snekawai? Well then, Feed becomes worse. Anger becomes a derable card. Bash becomes actually pretty great. Because relics do change so much, particularly ones like Snekawai, Runic Pyramid. But Impervious is good regardless of those. Infernal Blade, this is a tough one to rate. 1 energy. Add a random attack into your hand. It costs 0 this turn. Exhaust. This upgrades to cost 0 itself. And really needs an upgrade to be playable, I would say. I'm never really happy to... I really want to play against the Storm. I'm never really happy to pick Infernal Blade on floor 1. On floor 1, I'd say this is mediocre. And it doesn't generally get much better than that. Upgraded? It's pretty strong. It's got a strong upgrade associated with it. But we're not taking upgrades into account too much here. I gotta call it mediocre. Sometimes it'll give you an Immolate. Sometimes it'll give you a Fiendfire or a Feed. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it'll give you a Clash, and you're like, oh, this is very sad. I could have just put Clash in my deck instead of Infernal Blade. Inflame. 1 energy. Gain 2 strength. This is a power. The game is a little inconsistent with what it considers powers and what it considers skills. Inflame is a power, just gains you some stats. Fasting is a power, that actually does make sense. What am I thinking of? Reprogram is a skill, despite the fact that it just gives you some stats and takes some stats away. But this is a power, and it's a very good one. Inflame is often one of the first cards you see that kind of pushes you towards a strength scaling build, because early in Act 1, your priority really is to pick up damage. Particularly on High Ascension, you just need to pick up enough damage to make it through the elites before they kill you. And so you'll often end up by the middle of Act 1 with a deck full of mediocre cards like Twin Strike. Pommel Strike is okay, I suppose. Anger, which is like pretty good but not amazing. Cleave. So these common attacks. Heavy Blade, perhaps. These common attacks tend to form the bulk of the cards that you want to be playing in Act 1. Cards that don't require any synergy to get going. And just do enough damage so that you can get deep enough into the run that you start to form some kind of synergy. You start to pick up these kind of puzzle pieces and fit them together. Sorry, I don't know why I chose to record this with a cough. Very silly of me. Inflame is one of the cards you see that pushes you towards that, because Inflame makes all of those common attacks better. It makes Anger way better, because you're going to be drawing and playing the same Anger over and over again. It's really strong to have them all do a little bit more damage. It makes Cleave a lot better, makes Heavy Blade a lot better, Twin Strike, Sword Boomerang, Pommel Strike kinda, but just by virtue of it being a cheap attack. And your basic strikes makes them do 8 instead of 6, which is often very, very good in Act 1. This upgrades to gain 3 strength instead of 2. Inflame is nearly a snap pick for me. I'm going to put it in excellent card. You very rarely don't want to see it in Act 1, or even Act 2. Intimidate, 0 cost, skill, apply 1 weak to all enemies, and exhaust upgrades to apply 2 weak to all enemies and exhaust. Very, very strong upgrade. It's pretty good on its own though. It's kind of a panic button. You can see this as being 0 cost, block for somewhere between 3 and 5 in Act 1, somewhere between 10 and 15 usually in Act 3. It kind of scales itself by virtue of being by virtue of just what it does, which is apply weak to enemies. That scales with how much damage enemies are doing, which naturally goes up the higher you get, so weak becomes, self-scaling. I'm going to put it in Break Choice. I think it's somewhere between these two, Excellent and Break. I think it's very, very strong. Unfortunately, it's often a dead draw, because it just blocks for you, basically. So it's a dead draw as often as any block card is. And it's also a dead draw if the enemy is already weak. You often don't particularly care about applying more weak to enemies. You're not blocking for any more this turn by playing Intimidate. But it's very good. Iron Wave, 1 cost. Attack, gain 5 block, deal 5 damage. In that order, by the way, that can be important if the enemy has Thorns. There's an event in Slay the Spire. It's a pretty rare event called a Note for Yourself or a Note to Yourself. I can't remember which. And what that does is it offers you a card. And that card is Iron Wave. And you can choose to take the Iron Wave in exchange for one of your own cards that you have to give up. And then the next time you see that event on a subsequent run, it will have that card that you gave up there in place of the Iron Wave, and you'll be able to repeat the process and carry over cards between runs. Really fun event. Can only occur on low Ascension, but so at below Ascension 15. There's a reason that Iron Wave is the card that you're offered first of all. And that reason is, it is the epitome of a mediocre card that just does a little bit of block and does a bit of damage, and yeah, it scales with both strength and dexterity. It sort of is a weak attack that protects you from Thorns. It's okay. It's mediocre. Let's move on. Juggernaut, 2 energy, power. Whenever you gain block, deal 5 damage to a random enemy, upgrades to 7. Excuse me, God. Also, both of these upgrade to 7 as well. Gain 7 block, deal 7 damage, it's okay. Juggernaut is a lot of fun. And that's kind of all it is. If you're a block-focused deck that has maybe Barricade, maybe Entrench, maybe I'd add some, maybe Feel No Pain, for example, Impervious. Very block-focused defensive deck. You need to deal damage to win, right? And Juggernaut looks like a good option for that, but it's very, very slow. 2 energy, the turn you play it, you maybe get 10 damage out of it, split between random enemies. Fart noise. The better option for that deck, in terms of damage, is Body Slam. Deal damage equal to your block. Just stack up 200 block, play Body Slam, next fight please. Juggernaut is very slow, it's fun, it works really well with things like Feel No Pain, that generate lots of block, or lots of separate instances of block. I believe it also works that way with Self-Forming Clay, a great relic that you probably are going to want in that deck. I'm going to put it in Mediocre, but my heart wants to put it in Snap Pick. It's just such a fun little synergy. Next up is Limit Break. 1 cost skill, not power. Double your strength, exhaust. So floor 1, you never take this, right? It's a curse, does nothing. But if you have an Inflame in your deck, Limit Break becomes an Inflame 50% of the time. When you draw it, right? Depending on whether you've played the Inflame yet or not. A little bit more than 50%. If you draw them in the same hand, first of all, you play the Inflame, then you play Limit Break. If you have any more than that, Limit Break can be very good. But it's kind of overkill most of the time. It's kind of a trap a lot of the time. When do you want Limit Break? Well, you want Limit Break when you have some strength, but not a lot of strength. So it doesn't really work with Demon Form. Because if you have Demon Form, say Demon Form Plus, gain 3 strength every turn, you're going to go from like 15 strength to 30 strength? Well, what if instead of drawing Limit Break and doing that, you instead just drew a Twin Strike? That dealt 40 damage the turn you play it. Limit Break is okay, but it's so situational and it's often such overkill, and it's kind of a noob trap. I'm going to put it in Mediocre. It's somewhere between Mediocre and Break Choice. Metallicize, 1 energy power, at the end of your turn, gain 3 block. Oh, I keep doing this, I'm so sorry. Limit Break upgrades to not exhaust anymore, and that is just makes it so much more overkill for so little actual benefit that it's the epitome of a noob trap. I'm sorry, I used to like Limit Break too. I no longer like Limit Break, and you probably shouldn't either. Metallicize, 1 energy power at the end of your turn, gain 3 block. That's the end of every turn for the rest of the combat. In Act 1, it can give you a lot of breathing room. Play a Metallicize, you gain, 3 block a turn for, in Act 1, you're going to draw it like maybe turn 2 on average, because you have fewer cards in your deck. The fight's going to last maybe 4 turns, so it maybe gives you 9 blocks, some of which you may not use. It's not great. Upgrades to gain 4 block a turn, which is a pretty underwhelming upgrade. I think this could upgrade to gain 5 block at the end of each turn and be completely balanced. But it's not. It's 3 block / 4 block, and it's just not quite enough. It's not terrible. It's certainly not on the level of flex or defend. But it is, much like Iron Wave, just definitively mediocre. Offering, 0 cost skill. And I should say, I know, by the way, cards that have these persistent effects, usually powers, but not always, cards that have these persistent effects seem like infinite value. At the end of your turn, gain 3 block. Well, what if the fight goes for 25 turns? That's 75 block. That's 1 energy for 75 block? Imbalanced. It's not going 25 turns, is it? It's going 2 or 3 turns. At the end of the game, maybe 5 turns. Maybe the fight goes 5 turns after you draw Metallicize. That's 15 block for 1 energy. With no way to scale it. Doesn't scale with dexterity. It's kind of nothing. I'm sorry, it's not enough. Offering, 0 energy, skill. Lose 6 HP. Terrible. Next one, Perfected Strike. No, offering. Lose 6 HP. Gain 2 energy. Draw 3 cards. Exhaust. People are sometimes put off this card by lose 6 HP. Partly because that's the first line of text on it. And I should say also in Slay the Spire, cards with multiple effects like this one will trigger in that order. So first you lose 6 HP, and any effects related to losing HP resolve. Then you gain energy, and then you draw cards, and then it exhausts. Just that can be relevant. Six HP is a lot of HP to lose. But how much HP do you gain, or prevent the loss of, by essentially just taking an extra turn for free? Gaining 2 energy and drawing 3 cards. It's not quite a turn, but it's more than half a turn by default, right? Offering allows you to close out fights, I would say a turn earlier on average. And it's insane. Even if it doesn't allow you to close out the fight earlier, fine, whatever. 0 energy, lose 6 HP, gain 2 energy, draw 3 cards. What if you're going to draw block cards, right? If you can't full block, if you can't even close to full block, play the offering, gain 2 energy, draw a Shrug It Off, which blocks for 8, something like that. Draw a Ghostly Armor, you know? Draw some of the block that's in your deck. If you can't reliably draw block with offering, at least most of the time, you don't have enough block in your deck, right? That's not offering's fault. If offering isn't working out for you, you probably just aren't putting good cards in your deck, which means that the cards you're drawing are not worth playing. Not worth that 6 HP. This is a snap pick almost every time. Also synergizes really well with Reaper, which we'll talk about in about 10 minutes. Next up, Perfected Strike. 2 cost attack. Deal 6 damage. Deal 2 additional damage for all your cards containing strikes. So Ironclad starts out with 5 strikes, which adds an extra 10 damage to Perfected Strike, making it 2 energy, deal 16 damage. Perfected Strike also counts itself, so that makes it 2 energy, deal 18 damage on floor 1. It will also count other cards with strike in the name, like Pommel Strike, like Twin Strike. Some of which are pretty good. Not you, Wild Strike, not you. Perfected Strike is a card that you probably don't want to pick too much on low Ascension. And the reason for that is that you can afford to be a little bit more judicious about which early damage cards you take on low Ascension. But once you hit Ascension 17, 18, 19, everything starts kicking the tits out of you a lot faster. And so if you see a Perfected Strike, you take a Perfected Strike early so that you can kill something before it kills you. And what I learned when I was doing my Ascension climb on Ironclad is actually, I always thought Perfected Strike was terrible, but it does just kill stuff in Act 1. And honestly, that's pretty good. I'm going to shy just away from putting it in Break Choice, but to be honest, if you'd asked me a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I would have put it in Derrible, no question. But I've gained some respect for Perfected Strike. Not a lot, but a little. It upgrades to deal 3 additional damage for all strikes, by the way, so an extra, usually somewhere between 4 and 7 damage. It's fine. Not amazing, but fine. Offering upgrade. The only change to offering is it draws you 5 cards instead of 3. Wild. Wild upgrade. So good. Pommel Strike. 1 energy attack, deal 9 damage, draw 1 card, upgrades to deal 10, draw 2, which is quite generous. This is possibly the best damage common that Ironclad has. It's up there with Anger and Headbutt for sure. I will almost always take it over Cleave or Heavy Blade. It replaces itself, which is very good. If you upgrade it, it replaces itself and then draws an additional card. And the damage is not bad at all. 9 damage is quite substantial in Act 1. By virtue of being a cheap attack, it can benefit quite a bit from Strength. And it also works in Strength decks because Strength decks often want to have Anger. And Anger really benefits from card draw. So yeah, I'm going to put Pommel Strike in excellent card, and it might be the best card in this tier in a vacuum. Might be. There's Corruption, but Corruption in a vacuum is not that good. It's just really, really good when it's not in a vacuum. Gonna get hate mail about Corruption, I know it. Power Through. 1 energy, skill, add 2 wounds into your hand, gain 15 block. 15 block. This is a panic button, obviously. It's a lot of block, particularly for Ironclad. Compare it to Impervious. Impervious is a 2-cost rare card that gains 30 block, no questions asked, but you can only use it once per combat. I got a bit West Country. Adding 2 wounds into your hand is bad. I'm just going to say that. Generally. If you have Fiendfire, which exhausts everything else in your hand. If you have Second Wind, which exhausts non-attack cards in your hand, including statuses, gaining block for each of them. Power Through becomes just wild. Power Through is one of the best block cards Ironclad has access to. It might be one of the best block cards in the game, purely by virtue of most decks being able to do something about those wounds before you draw them again. If you have lots of card draw in your deck, Power Through is phenomenal. I don't think it's quite a snap pick. Block cards tend not to be, but it's very close. Excuse me? Thank you. Pummel, 1-cost attack, deal 2 damage 4 times. Exhaust. So the exhaust here is meh. It's not a significant part of this card really, most of the time. Obviously this scales very well with strength. Yes, by default it's deal 8 damage for 1 energy, and if you play it on a spike or an Act 3 you die. But if you have even 1 Inflame in play, it becomes 16 damage for 1 energy. If you're doing any kind of strength scaling, Pummel is one of the best cards you can possibly pick. If you're not, it's okay, but to be honest, most Ironclad decks will end up with 1 or 2 points of strength, generally, from something like Vajra, something like Duvu Doll at High Ascension. Inflame is a pretty common pick for Ironclad, even in decks that aren't trying to strength stack specifically. For that reason, it's going an excellent card. It's probably between excellent and great, but it's strong enough that I would pick it most of the time in a vacuum. Rage. 0-cost skill. Oh, this upgrades to deal 2 damage 5 times. Pretty good. Rage. 0-cost skill. Whenever you play an attack this turn, gain 3 block. Upgrades to 5 block. Rage, as you may be able to tell by the name, and this is no doubt deliberate, pairs really well with Anger. Pairs really well with any kind of low-cost attack spam deck. If Rage was a silent card, it would be a snap pick. Because Silent loves to play cheap attacks, like Shivs. Ironclad doesn't have that many of them. Are there any other 0-cost attacks? I should know this. Any other 0-cost attacks apart from Anger in Ironclad? There aren't. There just aren't. Oh, Clash. Clash does not count. Clash isn't a real card. But we do like playing Anger in strength decks, and strength decks often struggle with block. Because we have lots of low-cost attacks, we have Inflame, we might have Demon Form, we may even be doing Combust, Rupture stuff, but hopefully not. Rage is okay in those, it's very good in those decks. Overall, I think it's probably mediocre, but I think it's good enough in the decks where it's good that I'm going to put it in Break Choice. If you haven't experimented with Rage, give it a try, you might like it. Particularly if you have a lot of card draw. Rampage, or Rampage, no doubt an intentional pun, based on rampant growth from Magic Gathering, I believe. Yeah. Excuse me. A 1 energy attack, deal 8 damage, increase this card's damage by 5 this combat, upgrades to increase this card's damage by 8 this combat. I often wonder what I would have to change this card to make it playable. I think I've landed on, if it was 1 energy, deal 10 damage, increase this card's damage by 6 this combat, and it upgraded to 10 and 10 instead of 8 and 8, I think it would be okay. As it is, it's just a little undertuned. It's just a little bit slow, doesn't do enough. Strength scaling is fine with it because it's a 1-cost attack, so, you know, it's fine. Increase this card's damage by 5 this combat. That portion of the card is not affected by strength. So if you have 2 strength, it will be deal 10 damage, and then the next turn you play it, will be deal 15 damage instead of deal 13 damage. So it's not great. Reaper, 2-cost attack, deal 4 damage to all enemies, heal HP equal to unblocked damage dealt. Unblocked damage. That part's quite important if you're up against something that blocks, for example. Something like Snake Plant or Shelled Parasite or the fucking Orb guys that have Barricade. This upgrades to deal 5 damage. Generally considered one of the weakest upgrades on Ironclad, I would say, but it doesn't matter too much because the card itself is stunning. In a vacuum, I think this is somewhere between mediocre and Great Choice. But it's healing that scales with strength. I'm just gonna let that sit there for a second. That's healing that scales with strength. Is it a snap pick? It's not. It's pretty close. It's only not a snap pick because in a vacuum, it is just quite bad. But if you have even 1 Inflame in play, I mean, it's pretty good, right? It's 6 damage to everything and heal 6 times the number of things in combat. Just wonderful. I have seen Reaper full heal me from single-digit health to 3-digit health in one attack more times than I care to remember. You don't even need necessarily to have a demon form. An Inflame and a Limit Break will go a long way towards that, especially if you have an Exhume to draw it back, or a Limit Break Plus, or whatever, a spot weakness. You don't need much strength to make Reaper good, is what I'm saying. It's on the verge of being good regardless of how much strength you have. And yeah, just having 1 or 2 sources of strength just makes it delightful. Next up, we have a Reckless Charge, 0-cost attack, deal 7 damage, shuffle a Dazed into your draw pile. So Dazed is a status that exhausts when you end the turn with it in your hand. So you draw it once, it exhausts, that's it. That could be pretty good, right? We do a lot of good exhaust stuff on Ironclad generally. That interacts with Feel No Pain, it interacts with fucking Dark Embrace, interacts with Dead Branch, interacts with Charon's Ashes, a relic that we'll talk about in a later video probably, and make no promises. And Reckless Charge, 0-cost, deal 7 damage, that scales wonderfully with strength. By virtue of being a 0-cost attack, if you have like 4 strength, which is very, very reasonable to have, just kind of... what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, if you have 4 strength, which you will do quite often, Reckless Charge deals 11 damage for 0. Pretty strong. It's a pretty good floor 1 pick as well. What's the fucking word I'm looking for? I don't know. Rupture, 1 cost, power. Whenever you lose HP from a card, gain 1 strength. Reckless Charge just upgrades to deal 10, I think. Yeah, Rupture, whenever you lose HP from a card, gain 1 strength. Upgrades to gain 2 strength. This card is kind of a trap, unfortunately. Ironclad does have a self-damage package, which I've been talking about, but you'll notice a lot of the cards that benefit from it are like pretty low tier, notably Blood for Blood. Ugh, not great. Not great. Rupture, unfortunately, just prompts you to pick bad cards. The whole package just doesn't really work as well as you'd like it to. Combust is an okay floor 1 pick, and if you have a Combust in your deck when you see Rupture, you maybe pick Rupture. But it's just very, very slow as a damage engine. Even upgraded, 2 strength a turn, at the cost of losing energy, losing health, quite spooky. One good synergy that Rupture has is with the curse card Pain, which, when Pain is in your hand, causes you to lose 1 HP, not take 1 damage, lose 1 HP every time you play a card. Generally considered to be one of the worst curses alongside Normality, which limits you to 3 cards per turn. But with Rupture in play, Pain can be really fun and really funny. If you have Rupture, you definitely want Reaper. I would say you probably never pick Rupture unless you have significant healing, and the best source of healing is Reaper, because it scales with the strength that Rupture gives you. However, even if you only lose 1 HP every time Rupture goes off, the best case scenario, Reaper's only breaking you even on that strength, right? Assuming you're not fighting multiple things at once. Sometimes you will be, but often you won't be. It's not quite as good as it looks, is what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it's terrible, even though it's fun. Searing Blow, 2 energy, attack, deal 12 damage, can be upgraded any number of times. So, if you see this floor 1, if you see this before you choose which way you're going to go in Act 1, or if you're already prioritizing rest sites and you have quite a lot of them in Act 1, maybe 4, ideally you want 5, Searing Blow can be okay. The first upgrade to Searing Blow gives it 4 additional damage, taking it to 16. The next upgrade gives it 5, taking it to 21. The next gives it 6, taking it to 27, and so on and so forth. So every upgrade adds 1 more damage than the upgrade before it. That means that if you upgrade this, I'm not going to try and do like the triangle number maths on the fly, but I would say by the end of Act 2, you can get Searing Blow to be doing 100 damage, quite reasonably. However, it is only 1 card, and it's not a damage plan on its own. It needs support. You need to draw it, so you need lots of card draw, something that Ironclad generally struggles a little bit with. Something like Corruption Dark Embrace can be good, because you're getting rid of all your skills and you're generating card draw based on that, so you'll draw Searing Blow a lot more often. Because of the scaling nature of Searing Blow's upgrades, you really want to be upgrading it as much as possible, to at least until the end of Act 2. I think you want to be doing at least 70 or 80 damage with Searing Blow before you even consider upgrading anything else. Which means you also want to be picking up fewer cards, because you're not spending upgrades on those cards, right? So you want to be picking up cards that are good even without an upgrade. You don't want to pick up things like Body Slam, which is only good when you upgrade it. You don't want to be picking up things like, I would say probably don't want to be picking up Evolve, which is only really good when you upgrade it. You get the picture. So I think Searing Blow is kind of a trap, because it forces you to make bad decisions. Notably, it forces you to prioritize rest sites over elites when you're pathing. Makes other cards worse by preventing you from upgrading them, and it's really only remotely good when you've upgraded it 5 or 6 times. You might think you upgrade it twice, and it deals 21 damage. That's more than Carnage, right? That's more than Heavy Blade with 2 strength. Sure, I agree, but that's once you've spent 2 upgrades on it. That's an opportunity cost. So you need to be moving kind of past that point as much as possible. It needs to be, for the amount that you're spending on it in terms of meta resources and upgrades, you really, really need to be upgrading it 10, 12 times before it's good. And that is just not good enough for me. Second Wind, 1 cost, exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand, gain 5 block for each card exhausted. Upgrades to 7. What is the... I was just thinking, what does Searing Blow upgrade to? I've just spent 2 minutes talking about it. Brain fart. Second Wind. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand. Gain 5/7 block for each card exhausted. This is one of Ironclad's best block cards. I feel like I've been saying that a lot. Ironclad does not have many block cards, but they tend to be quite strong. And Second Wind is certainly no exception. Second Wind is an excellent card because it has exhaust synergy. It gains a ton of block, usually. You're able to kind of whittle your hand down to cards that you don't mind getting rid of. And then Second Wind both gets rid of them and gives you like 10-15 block. Very strong. Seeing Red, 1 cost skill, gain 2 energy, exhaust. Upgrades to gain 3 energy, exhaust. Seeing Red is... It suffers from the same kind of issue as... what's the card I was talking about a million years ago? Oh, my brain's just completely fucking gone. Bloodletting, sorry. Yeah, Seeing Red and Bloodletting, quite similar cards. So, yeah, I mean, much like Hemokinesis as opposed to Carnage, right? Seeing Red costs 1 more energy, Bloodletting costs health, and they both give you the same benefit. Seeing Red also exhausts, which is probably something you want, because exhausting is good, and Seeing Red is generally bad. I think Seeing Red is worse than Bloodletting, generally. Even though it doesn't quite suffer as much from essentially the -1 draw on account of costing a bit more energy. It just doesn't do enough. If this was a 0 cost card that said gain 1 energy, it would be better. This is a miracle. By which I mean it's the card that Watcher starts with as a result of her starting relic. It's a miracle that requires you to actually have some starting capital. And it just isn't very good. It's somewhere between Derable and Kidioka. I think I'm going to call it Derable. Might be upsetting some people with that, but I really very rarely see a use for Seeing Red. Sentinel, 1 energy skill, gain 5 block. If this card is exhausted, gain 2 energy. So this is a dual function card, right? You can't gain the block from it and gain the energy from it in the same turn. It's one or the other. And the block isn't great. I mean, it's obviously exactly the same as a defend. This is a card that you want to exhaust. Which means in a vacuum, it's Derable. I'm going to put it in Kidioka because when you have something like Corruption, especially with Dark Embrace, Feel No Pain, all of that package, Sentinel is quite strong, but even then it doesn't really do a huge amount. Like, exhausting it gives you energy, but you probably don't have energy problems if you're running Corruption, right? If you're running Dark Embrace as well, sure. But just based on having both an uncommon and a rare card, it being good, I can't call it good based just on that. 2 cost, attack, Sever Soul. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand, deals 16 damage, upgrades to 22. Sentinel upgrades to 3 energy, which is quite good. Does it? I actually don't know what the Sentinel upgrade is. That should tell you how good it is. Sever Soul, 2 energy, attack. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand, deals 16 damage, upgrades to 22. Quite a bit of damage. Not as much as Carnage, but, you know, Carnage is very, very strong. And exhausting non-attack cards is very good. Don't know if you knew that. It does sometimes get in the way of, like, you don't necessarily want to exhaust certain powers or skills, but broadly, exhausting cards is better than not exhausting them. I don't think this is as good as Second Wind, because I think Ironclad does not struggle to find damage more often than not. It struggles with finding enough block to give it the breathing room it needs to play that damage. Apologies, that was my phone. I don't know if it came through the mic in any way which may have led you to believe it was yours. Probably not. But if it did, I apologize. Sever Soul, I'm going to put in Break Choice. I think it's fine. I don't think it's particularly exceptional, and there are better exhaust synergies out there, but Sever Soul is quite a good one. Shockwave, 2 cost skill, apply 3 weak and vulnerable to all enemies, exhaust. Upgrades to 5 weak and vulnerable to all enemies. This trivializes so many long fights. Shockwave is not generally great in hallway fights, although it can be. If you have the energy to play it, it's fairly costly. But against bosses, particularly bosses that don't have artifacts, Shockwave is exceptional. This is very nearly a snap pick. This actually... I think I'm going to put this in Snap Pick. I think it's probably in a vacuum the weakest of these 5 cards, but it is not far off at all. And I would much rather have a Shockwave in most circumstances than any of these. Fits really well into an Exhaust Synergy deck. I'm just going to put Feel No Pain here so I can do this. Works really well with Corruption by virtue of being a high-cost, high-impact skill. It's just very, very strong. And again, Corruption, I can't call it a snap pick, but it's so strong. Shrug It Off. 1 energy skill. Gain 8 block, draw 1 card. It's just a nice little block card, right? It's a real block card. It's not... It's kind of Kidioka in the way that, for example, Iron Wave is a little bit, Metallicize is a little bit, but it's generally just such an inoffensive card. You very rarely get to the point where you're like, I've got too many Shrug It Offs. You're usually sort of always happy to add it to your deck, especially with Corruption. With Corruption, there's almost no limit to the amount of Shrug It Offs that you want, as long as you can still draw the Corruption. I'm putting it in Break Choice. In a vacuum, it's very strong. Spot Weakness, 1 energy skill. If the enemy intends to attack, gain 3 strength, upgrades to 4. Shrug It Off upgrades to 11 block, I'm so sorry. Spot Weakness, if the enemy intends to attack, gain 3/4 strength. It's conditional, but it's strong, right? If Inflame is gain 2 strength for 1 energy, Spot Weakness is almost strictly better. You do get attacked more often than not. That said, when you don't get attacked, it's a dead card. Also, this card is slightly worse than it might initially look when you account for the fact that you often have less choice in what to do when you're being attacked, right? In times when you're not being attacked, you can fuck around and do whatever you want. You can set up, you can deal damage, you can do whatever. But you can't play Spot Weakness. You can only play Spot Weakness when you've got some pressure on you and when you need to play some blocks. And so Spot Weakness often is not as high priority as it might initially look. I think it's still a great choice, but you probably only want 1 or 2 of them in your deck. Strike. Derable. Starter card. Leave them out of these tier lists, please. Sword Boomerang. 1 cost attack. Deal 3 damage to a random enemy 3 times. Upgrades to deal 3 damage to a random enemy 4 times. Obviously, this upgrades really well with strength. This is not an area of effect card. This is a card that is significantly worse than most attacks when it's in an area of effect situation. This is a single target card, and it's a very good one, I would say, if you have strength. If you have an Inflame in play, which is sort of like the benchmark for strength, right? It's 1 energy, deal 15 damage. That's pretty good. If the enemy is vulnerable, that goes up to 21 damage, right? Goes from 5 to 7. 3 times. I think it's Kidioka, but it's not far off being a break choice. I would pick it floor 1 over a skip, but only just. But as soon as you have a Vajra, for example, it deals 12 damage for 1 enemy. That's for 1 energy. That's very strong. If you have Inflame, it deals 15 damage for 1 energy. If you have Demon Form Plus that's been in play for 3 turns, it deals 36 damage. Right? That's like the upper case, but it's pretty good. So it's Kidioka sort of verging on break choice. Thunderclap, 1 cost attack, deal 4 damage and apply 1 vulnerable to all enemies. This is a card that I really want to like. Upgrades to deal 7 damage to all enemies and apply 1 vulnerable, by the way. If this upgraded to deal 4 damage and apply 2 vulnerable to all enemies, I think it would be a great choice. But as it is, I'm going to have to call it Kidioka. I like it, but it just isn't good, and no amount of me liking it is going to change that. True Grit, 1 cost skill, gains 7 block, upgrades to 9. And exhaust a random card in your hand. Upgrades to exhaust a card of your choice from your hand, which is secretly the good part of the upgrade. 2 extra block on the upgrade is fine. It's completely fine. Pretty weak upgrade, but being able to choose which card to exhaust is phenomenal, because this card, unupgraded, is a liability. Unupgraded, I put this in Kidioka every time. Upgraded, it's excellent, dude. It's absolutely excellent. I do see it overall as being comparable to Shrug It Off. Exhausting a card is almost like a delayed card draw, because when you would next draw the card you exhaust, you don't, because you've exhausted it. Instead, you draw another card. So exhausting a card that you don't want is almost like drawing a card in the future. And it does gain quite a bit of block. And obviously, it does work with exhaust synergies as well. I'm going to put it in break choice. I think without an upgrade, it's not so great. Not so great. But with an upgrade, deserves to be there, or at least, yeah, maybe higher. Twin Strike, 1 cost attack, deal 5 damage twice. This is one of those cards that you have the luxury of ignoring early on in your Ascension climb, like Cleave or Heavy Blade or Clothesline. Clothesline's a great example. Iron Wave, cards that are better than a Strike or a Defend, but not by that much. However, I think it's better than Kidioka. I think it's sort of, I would pick this sort of on par with Cleave, most of the time, I think. Sort of on par with Heavy Blade, maybe a bit better than Heavy Blade, scales with strength in the same way as Heavy Blade, obviously. Might as well say 1 energy, deal 10 damage, gain double the effect from strength. That's pretty good. It's not bad at all. Uppercut, 2 cost attack, deal 13 damage, apply 1 weak, 1 vulnerable. This upgrades to still deal 13 damage, but apply 2 weak and vulnerable. Immediate parallel with Clothesline, 2 cost attack, they deal pretty much the same amount of damage and apply 2 stats, 2 status effects. 2 weak in the case of Clothesline, 1 weak for 1 vulnerable in the case of Uppercut, but I do think it's slightly better. Partly because the upgrade is better. Applying 2 turns of weak is exceptional, applying 2 turns of vulnerable is very good as well. For the same reason as Bash, right? The 2 vulnerable doesn't... It's a bit misleading, because you've already spent 2 energy on the turn you apply the vulnerable, so you can't make as good use of it. But I think Uppercut is going in Break Choice. Only just, though. Only just. It's almost Kidioka. Warcry, 0 cost skill, draw 1 card, upgrade to 2 cards, put a card from your hand on the top of your draw pile. This is negative draw. Because you draw the Warcry, and then you play it, and you draw another card, and then you... So that kind of replaces itself, right? You're drawing a card to replace the Warcry. And then you put a card from your hand on the top of your draw pile. So you end up with 1 less card in your hand. For, like, no real effect. It's a setup card that is sort of so bad, generally. Even upgraded, it's not good. Right, I'm going to put it in Derable. I'm just saying that right now. Yeah, it allows you to save a card for the next turn. That's fine. But it also means that you essentially have 2 fewer cards this turn. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Now, what can I say? Whirlwind. X cost. Ironclad's only native X cost card. Deal 5 damage to all enemies X times. So if you have 3 energy, you spend 3 energy and deal 5 damage to all enemies 3 times. Oof. Upgrades to deal 8 damage X times. This is a very strong card. I think this is excellent. Somewhere between excellent and great, maybe. It solves AoE in the same way Cleave does, but it also gives you a bit more kind of leeway on what you do. You can actually play it for 0 and trigger like on attack effects like Shuriken and Kunai, which trigger when you play 3 attacks in a given turn. Yeah, it's generally good. I will say, if you pick up Whirlwind early, single target, it's worse efficiency than Strike. Energy for energy, Strike deals 6, Whirlwind deals 5. But in terms of how well it scales, Whirlwind is actually very, very strong. And last is Wild Strike. 1 energy, deal 12 damage, shuffle a wound into your draw pile. Now this does upgrade to deal 17 damage, and you might be thinking, well, how bad can a wound in your draw pile possibly be? Look at Power Through. You said Power Through was a pretty good card. Here it is in Excellent. What do you got to say for yourself? Well, Power Through adds wounds into your hand, which gives you at least a couple of turns before you draw them most of the time. You can probably close out the fight in that time, most of the time, sometimes at least. Wild Strike, you could be drawing that wound next turn. You could be drawing it this turn with a Shrug It Off or something like that. And gaining 15 block turns out to be a lot better than dealing 12 damage most of the time. Power Through, by the way, upgrades to 20 block. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's so strong. Wild Strike upgrades to deal 17 damage. Shuffle a wound into your draw pile. How badly do you want to deal 17 damage that you're willing to draw a curse next turn? It's not good. It's not good. This has been fun. I've enjoyed this. It's taken a bit longer than I expected, even with how fast I talk. But yeah, I think I will be back at some point with the other classes and with the boss relics and stuff. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this was remotely helpful, or at least entertaining, or at least maybe it helped you sleep. I don't know. Have a good one. See you later.